The air was thick with an uncomfortable tension as the pregnant wife walked gracefully through the upscale hotel lobby, her hand resting protectively on her growing belly. She was dressed simply but radiated an elegance that drew admiring glances from those around her. Without warning, that calm atmosphere shattered. From across the polished marble floor, the mistress, clad in designer clothes and carrying a gleaming luxury handbag, strode forward, her eyes blazing with unrestrained jealousy. Before anyone could comprehend what was happening, the mistress raised her arm and brought the heavy bag crashing down against the wife's shoulder and side, the sound echoing sharply like a crack through the room. Gasps erupted instantly from the crowd. People froze mid-step, their conversations silenced in disbelief at the shocking act of aggression. Some covered their mouths, others reached out instinctively, as if they could stop the blow even though it had already landed. The wife stumbled slightly under the unexpected strike, her body tensing, one arm rushing to shield her stomach, the other instinctively lifting to protect herself. The pain on her face wasn't just physical, it was mixed with shock and betrayal, an expression that silently asked how another woman could be so cruel, especially towards someone carrying an innocent life. The mistress, however, seemed unbothered by the horrified reactions. Her grip on the bag tightened, her lips curled into a venomous sneer, as though she believed this assault had somehow proven her dominance. Jealousy had consumed her so fully that she no longer cared about the setting or the consequences. To her, this public humiliation was a victory, a declaration that she would not tolerate being overshadowed by the wife, pregnant or not. Around them, the crowd's reaction grew louder, phones were raised, whispers turned into hurried conversations, and some rushed forward to check if the wife was all right. A security guard on the far side of the lobby began moving quickly toward the disturbance, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the unfolding scene. Yet amid all the chaos, one person remained entirely oblivious to the disgrace and danger unraveling in front of dozens of witnesses, the husband. Unaware of the violence his mistress had just inflicted, he was elsewhere, enjoying his evening without any knowledge that the fragile life of his wife and unborn child had just been endangered. The silence that followed the initial commotion was suffocating, broken only by the murmurs of onlookers. The incident, though lasting only seconds, left a mark that none who witnessed it would forget. The pregnant wife, shaken but still standing, became the center of attention, her trembling figure a living symbol of both vulnerability and resilience in the face of an unprovoked, vicious strike. Her life had never been about extravagance or power. Instead, it was built on quiet hopes and tender dreams. The pregnant wife, often overshadowed by the noise of wealth and status surrounding her millionaire husband, found her true joy in the small moments, the gentle kicks of her unborn child, the serene evenings spent imagining a nursery filled with laughter, the dream of creating a family bound by love rather than appearances. Yet, beneath that fragile hope, she carried a weight of loneliness that few could see. Her husband's attention, once steady, had begun to drift. She noticed the way his eyes lingered elsewhere, the late nights explained by excuses that felt rehearsed, and the emotional distance that grew wider with each passing day. Despite these cracks, she endured silently, not out of weakness but because of her determination to shield her unborn child from conflict. She whispered promises to the life growing inside her, vowing to provide protection, love, and stability, even when she herself felt vulnerable and overlooked. In the stillness of the night, when the world around her slept, she often pressed her hand to her stomach and spoke softly, assuring the baby that they were already cherished. Her vulnerability did not come from fragility alone, it came from the deep well of sacrifice she had chosen to make. She allowed her husband the freedom to wander emotionally, though it tore at her, because she believed that in the end, love could still prevail. She bore the humiliation of whispers, the sting of neglect, and the quiet heartbreak of being replaced in her husband's world by another woman, all in the hope that her child would one day know a family that was whole. Yet the betrayal cut deep. The mistress's existence wasn't just a wound to her pride, it was a constant reminder that her place in her husband's life was under siege. Still, instead of bitterness, she clung to her child, finding strength in the maternal bond that no mistress, no betrayal, and no cruelty could break. Every dream she nurtured, of rocking her baby to sleep, of hearing the first laugh, of watching little feet take their first steps, was wrapped in vulnerability. She feared the world her child would be born into, especially with so much conflict swirling around, but she chose hope over despair. Her quiet suffering was hidden behind a calm smile, her love unshaken even as her world grew harsher. In her heart, she knew she was the shield for her unborn child, willing to endure pain, humiliation, and heartbreak just to give her baby a chance at a peaceful beginning. The mistress's fury was like a storm that had been building for far too long, and when it finally broke, it was laced with jealousy sharp enough to cut through reason. She had always wanted more money, more influence, more power, and to her, the millionaire husband represented everything she believed she deserved. Yet standing in her way was the pregnant wife, a woman she deemed fragile, unworthy, and incapable of holding the attention of such a powerful man. Each time she saw the wife, gentle and quiet with her hand resting on her growing belly, the mistress's chest tightened with rage. What she saw wasn't just a rival, it was a reminder that no matter how seductive she was still an outsider, still second best, still chasing the life she thought should have been hers. Her obsession with wealth was not simply about comfort, it was about validation. She had come from a world where she was overlooked, where beauty was her only currency, and she vowed never to be powerless again. To her, the wife symbolized everything she resented, a woman who had not fought for this life, who simply married into riches, and who now carried the air that would secure her place forever. The thought alone was unbearable. Jealousy twisted her thoughts into dangerous shapes. She convinced herself that she deserved to stand in the wife's place, that the husband's drifting affection was proof the universe agreed with her. Every glance from him, every careless word that dismissed his wife's needs, became fuel to her fire. But envy is never satisfied. It devoured her, urging her to do more, to push boundaries, to eliminate the obstacle that stood between her and the life she coveted. Violence became, in her mind, not just an outlet but a necessity. She no longer saw the wife as a human being carrying a vulnerable life, but as a barrier that needed to be removed. The strike with the luxury bag was more than an impulsive act, it was the physical manifestation of years of simmering resentment. It was her way of declaring war, of proving that she would not remain in the shadows. The mistress was consumed, driven not by love but by possession, not by passion but by power. Her jealous fury had no limits, and in her mind, only by destroying her rival could she finally claim everything she had always believed was hers. The millionaire husband moved through life with the confidence of a man accustomed to control, yet when it came to matters of the heart, he was blind in ways that would cost him dearly. The mistress had carefully studied him, learning his weaknesses, his hunger for admiration, his need to feel youthful and desired, and his tendency to believe he could balance two worlds without consequence. She whispered the right words at the right time, stroked his ego when it was bruised, and painted his wife as distant, fragile, and undeserving of the fire he believed still burned within him. Slowly, the mistress became his escape, the place where he felt alive, while his wife, quiet and weary from carrying their unborn child, was unfairly cast as the dull weight of responsibility. He didn't notice the loneliness in his wife's eyes when he left their home for another late night. He didn't hear the unspoken fear in her voice when she begged him to stay close. He didn't see the danger circling her, because he was too wrapped in the mistress's illusions, too drunk on her flattery and manipulation. When small incidents arose, a stranger lingering too long nearby, whispers of tension in the household, he dismissed them as paranoia, telling his wife she was overreacting. In truth, his blindness wasn't just about the mistress's manipulation, it was also about his own pride. Admitting his wife might be in danger meant admitting he had failed to protect her, and acknowledging her suffering meant facing the reality of his betrayal. It was easier to believe the mistress's version of the story, that his wife was fragile, dramatic, and out of touch, than to confront his own guilt. And so, he turned away from the one who needed him most, leaving his pregnant wife vulnerable and unseen, as the storm around them silently gathered strength. The security head entered the story with the quiet confidence of a man who had lived through storms far harsher than the glittering chaos of the millionaire's world. Tall, disciplined, and with the sharp gaze of someone trained to notice every detail, he carried the aura of an ex-marine who had faced the unpredictability of war. To the outside world, he was simply a professional hired to guard the household, blending seamlessly into the background, always alert but never intrusive. His presence was reassuring to guests and employees, but few realized how deeply personal his role truly was. For beneath the polished surface of duty and professionalism, The security head carried a secret. He knew the pregnant wife far better than anyone else in that household. Long before the wealth, long before the marriage, their paths had crossed in a time of raw humanity. She had been a source of kindness in his darkest days, offering friendship and understanding when he had returned scarred and adrift from the military. That bond, unspoken and carefully guarded, had never been forgotten. Now, fate had placed him in her orbit again, this time under the guise of protection. To others, his vigilance seemed like part of the job, but in truth, every glance toward her was layered with memory and unshakable resolve. He saw her vulnerability, the subtle tremor in her smile, the loneliness her husband overlooked. And though no one else knew, he carried within him a vow, to shield her and the child she carried, no matter the cost. Unknown to the mistress, unknown even to the millionaire husband, the ex-marine's loyalty was not to wealth or contract but to something far deeper, a personal debt of gratitude and a bond forged in the quiet moments of the past. In the unfolding storm, his role would not remain in the shadows for long. Years before the chaos of wealth, betrayal, and dangerous rivalries, the wife had lived through a season of quiet hardship that left scars invisible to the outside world. It was during that time she first crossed paths with a man who would later become the household's security head. Freshly returned from his service as a Marine, he was struggling to find his place in civilian life. The war had left him with memories that haunted his nights, and though his composure rarely cracked, he carried an emptiness that few could understand. Their meeting was unexpected yet profound. She had been volunteering at a community outreach center, offering support to those rebuilding their lives, and he had walked in carrying the weight of his battles, both physical and unseen. Unlike others who admired his uniform but never saw the man beneath, she had looked past the hardened exterior and recognized his pain. She treated him not as a soldier defined by war but as a human in need of connection. That kindness, so simple yet so rare, built the foundation of a bond that neither of them would forget. When he spoke of the nightmares that plagued him, she listened without judgment. When he doubted his worth, she reminded him of the strength he still carried. And when he stood on the edge of giving up, she offered words that became an anchor, that even the most broken can find purpose again. In return, he became her quiet guardian, stepping in one evening when a confrontation on the street left her in danger. Without hesitation, he defended her, ensuring she returned home safe. It was in that moment that his protective instincts toward her became something unshakable, a promise never spoken but deeply felt. Though life pulled them in different directions, their paths diverging as she entered into a marriage of wealth and he pursued a career in private security, fate had a way of circling back. When the millionaire husband hired him, neither expected that the bond forged years ago would resurface. Yet now, with her carrying new life and danger circling closer than ever, their reunion carried the weight of destiny. She was no longer just a kind woman from his past. She was a mother-to-be, fragile and strong all at once, and he knew in his heart that protecting her wasn't simply duty. It was the fulfillment of a vow he had made long ago, in a life where they had saved each other in different ways. The wife began to notice the smallest things, shadows that lingered longer than they should, footsteps echoing behind her when she walked through the quiet halls, and unfamiliar faces appearing too often in familiar places. At first, she told herself it was just her nerves, heightened by the fragility of pregnancy. But as the days passed, the feeling of being watched grew stronger, more suffocating, until it could no longer be dismissed as imagination. Her instincts screamed that danger was near. When she tried to confide in her husband, he brushed her off with a tired smile, assuring her she was only overthinking. To him, her words were the anxieties of a woman under strain, and he was too blinded by the mistress's whispers to see the truth. Each dismissal cut her deeper, leaving her to face her fears alone. The distance between them widened, and with every ignored plea, her sense of isolation grew heavier, pressing against her spirit like an unseen weight. Yet even in her loneliness, she was not as alone as she believed. The ex-Marine security head, ever watchful, had already noticed the patterns she feared. His sharp eyes traced the movements around her, his instincts picking up on the silent threats circling closer. While she lay awake at night, staring into the darkness and whispering reassurances to her unborn child, he was outside, ensuring no harm reached her door. She never knew the quiet lengths he went to for her safety, how he adjusted patrols, studied strangers, and silently tracked the danger that her husband refused to acknowledge. Her world felt fragile, ready to crack beneath the weight of fear. And though she carried her child with unshakable love, she carried her dread just as tightly. In her heart, she knew something was coming, something that would test not only her strength but her very will to protect the life within her. The second outburst came like a storm no one could ignore. It happened in a glittering public setting, a charity gala filled with polished guests, cameras flashing, and whispers of prestige swirling through the air. The pregnant wife, dressed simply yet gracefully, moved through the room with quiet dignity. But the mistress, unable to contain her festering rage, saw her rival as an unshakable reminder that she had not yet won. With her jealousy boiling over, she lunged forward once again, this time unleashing her fury in front of an audience far too large to be silenced. Her hand clutched her designer bag like a weapon, her words dripping venom as she accused the wife of stealing affection, of clinging to a man who no longer wanted her. Then, in a reckless surge, she struck out again, not caring that dozens of shocked faces turned toward the scene. Gasps rippled through the crowd, some guests frozen in disbelief while others rushed to shield the wife. The air crackled with scandal, the kind of spectacle that could not be hidden behind wealth or status. This time, however, the wife was not left to stand alone. The ex-Marine, always near though never overbearing, moved in with precision. His presence was commanding, his voice steady as he caught the mistress's arm mid-swing, halting her cruelty before it could land another blow. The tension in the room shifted instantly. No longer was this about whispers or private suspicions, but about an act of cruelty witnessed by all. The mistress's carefully crafted image of charm and allure cracked under the weight of her public display, and suspicion began to settle on her shoulders. Guests exchanged knowing looks, their admiration for the wife's quiet strength growing as their disgust for the mistress's venom spread. Cameras captured the moment, freezing it into evidence that could not be erased. And at the center of it all stood the ex-Marine, a silent protector whose intervention transformed the mistress's jealousy into her undoing. His calm exposure of her violence didn't just defend the wife, it marked a turning point, where the crowd began to see the truth for themselves. The mistress was no longer the glamorous companion, she was the aggressor, and her mask was slipping fast. The carefully spun web of lies the mistress had built began to unravel thread by thread, and once the first piece of evidence surfaced, the rest followed like a flood. Whispers turned into testimonies, photographs emerged from shocked witnesses at the gala, and security footage captured more than the mistress ever imagined. Her violence was no longer a secret hidden behind silk curtains and sweet words, it was laid bare for all to see. For the millionaire husband, the revelations cut like knives. Each image, each account, each piece of undeniable proof forced him to confront the reality he had refused to see. The woman he believed adored him had been nothing more than a manipulator, pulling him away from the wife who had loved him quietly through his neglect. Shame crashed over him as he realized how easily he had been blinded. His pride, his vanity, his hunger for admiration had left his pregnant wife vulnerable to humiliation and danger. He saw, at last, the fear in her eyes he had ignored, the silent pleas he had brushed aside. The truth was brutal. His blindness had nearly cost them everything. But amidst the devastation came another revelation, one far more personal. As the chaos settled, the wife finally learned the full truth about her silent guardian. The ex-Marine who had stepped in so fiercely, who had shielded her when no one else would, was not just a loyal employee bound by contract. He was her past, her confidant from years ago, the man who had once stood by her during a time of hardship. The realization struck her with equal parts shock and gratitude. He had not re-entered her life by coincidence. Fate had placed him there again, just when she needed protection most. The wife's heart ached at the depth of loyalty he had carried in silence, watching over her while she believed herself completely alone. His presence was more than professional. It was a living reminder that not all bonds are broken by time or circumstance. As the husband wrestled with guilt and the mistress's facade collapsed around her, the wife felt a glimmer of strength rise within her. The truth had unfolded, and though it brought pain, it also brought clarity. The illusions were shattered, but in their place stood undeniable loyalty, long overdue accountability, and the chance for a new beginning. The end came not with whispers but with the sharp, undeniable weight of justice. The mistress, once cloaked in luxury and influence, now faced the consequences of her cruelty. Witnesses stepped forward, evidence was irrefutable, and her charm, once so carefully wielded, crumbled under the gaze of those who had seen her true face. No amount of excuses or manipulation could erase the sight of her public violence or undo the harm she had inflicted. What she thought was her greatest weapon, her beauty, her allure, became meaningless in the cold light of truth. She was no longer envied or admired but condemned, left to face the judgment of both the law and the society she had once sought to dominate. For the millionaire husband, the collapse of the mistress's facade was mirrored by the collapse of his own pride. The weight of his blindness pressed heavily against him as he looked at the woman he had wronged most, his wife. Her quiet strength, her unshaken love for their unborn child, and her resilience in the face of betrayal left him humbled. With shame etched across his face, he sought forgiveness, not expecting it to come easily, if at all. His apologies were heavy, his words faltering, for he knew no excuse could erase the nights he had dismissed her fears or the times he had left her unprotected. Yet in his remorse, there was sincerity, and though the wounds ran deep, the first fragile steps toward redemption were taken. The ex-Marine, meanwhile, emerged not as a mere employee but as the silent pillar who had held everything together when it was ready to fall apart. His unwavering loyalty, born from the bond of the past, had carried the wife through her most dangerous moments. For her, gratitude was too small a word to capture what she felt. He had been her shield when no one else had listened, her strength when she had felt alone, and her protector when the shadows closed in. Their reunion, unexpected yet destined, had reminded her that true loyalty and love could exist without condition. And for the wife herself, this ending was not simply survival, it was transformation. She stood stronger than before, no longer the silent sufferer but a woman who had faced betrayal and cruelty yet emerged unbroken. With her unborn child growing inside her, she embraced the future with renewed hope, determined to give her baby a life free from the poison of envy and deceit. Her motherhood would be her triumph, her redemption, and her new beginning.